Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Eric Eden. He's an entrepreneur in the blockchain digital asset space. He is got a lot of experience in marketing. And so today we're going to be talking about marketing as an investment as opposed to an expense. He's got a lot of ideas about how it's evolving, AI, trends, and I'm really happy to welcome Eric to the show. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know we go back a couple years during the digital asset winter market, we're part of the Blockworks and so talk about your story and you've always been a marketer and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Absolutely. So I've been in tech marketing for 25 years. So I started during the dot-com boom, and I spent some time out in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area working with tech companies, and being there, in recent years, particularly it ended up working out being during COVID, but being there in recent years, you couldn't help but get drawn into sort of the crypto and digital markets there, because it was all sort of immersive in the Bay Area for a number of years. But I've worked on tech marketing for SaaS companies. I'm very interested and have been following AI very closely for the last couple of years, and I think that's a fascinating sort of evolution. Lots of interesting things there, and generally, I've been a chief marketing officer and leading B2B marketing teams for many years. And so I like to think about marketing in itself as an investment, versus just spending money. So chat about that maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, and this concept of marketing as an investment is really interesting, especially with a lot of the change and the shifts, especially talk about this first thing is how marketing is evolving in 2024 and where you see it going.
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting is AI is changing things. So the way Google works is really evolving. The SEO that people relied on for many years as a channel to get traffic to their website and get business is really changing, because 20 years ago, the question was, whatever your question, Google has the answer. But now it's more like, whatever your question, ChatGPT has the answer. So Google is being forced to sort of evolve the natural search results in SEO. And so that's causing a lot of marketers to really have to shift their strategy and invest in other things. So that's one big shift. Another big shift is Google and Microsoft and other companies have really tightened down email delivery. And so email marketing was a huge channel for marketers, and it's gotten a lot less effective because a lot fewer emails get through. It's very easy to get filtered, even if you're doing white hat sort of things. It's very, very tight. And so that really makes marketers rethink some of their email strategies. And then on the online advertising front, a couple of years ago, we had the Apple and Meta getting into sort of a fight, and the iOS 14 update really made the efficiency of a lot of the online advertising a lot less. I mean, if that had continued, if that hadn't happened, I would be like retired on a beach, because the targeting on Facebook advertising is so good.
Yeah.
And when they made that change just like 2 years ago, it really dropped the return on online advertising for a lot of the companies that I've worked with, from like they were getting 4 times the money every dollar they put in, they were getting $4 out, and then it went down to like they were getting $1 for every $1 they were putting in. It became like 75% less effective, and that's just like an example of how things are changing across like 3 areas of marketing. There's other changes, but
Yeah.
people really have to be looking at every channel and everything they're doing, and like, what is the return on investment per marketing channel? Otherwise, I mean, you can lose a lot of money really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really and so one thing that can talk about because you opened up two questions is, recently because I read a lot from Medium and the Medium started to before it was like awesome because I could use like ChatGPT and AI and create all these articles and now Medium saying that if you use AI, they're gonna, down regulate your article so it gets less views. And and like same thing with like blog. And then the second thing is that you were talking about is there's this the social media. Well, I want to hear your comments, but like social media, like you get like views and followers, but that really doesn't equate to sales. And so now you have to like build a community. So talk about those two ideas.
Yeah, so I think that with AI, I think there's still a lot of open questions for marketers and businesses before they really scale into using AI because you can't just put it on autopilot. It's not good enough yet where you can put it on autopilot and it can just write things for you and it can do all of it. What it can do is it can, instead of doing everything from scratch yourself, it can get you maybe 60% of the way there with the current like ChatGPT 4, for example.
Yeah.
And that's good, like it's helpful, but you can't just trust it to give accurate information. You can't trust it to write it in a way that is authentic. And if you do create things like images or copy with AI, you don't really own the intellectual property and copyright rights to it. And so that's challenging for a lot of companies too, right? So there's a bunch of open issues. I think it's very interesting to watch it evolve. When I use like ChatGPT version 2, basically the 2.0 version of it, uh, years ago, it was completely unusable. It only got you like 10% of the way there, right? So I do think things will evolve. And like when we get to ChatGPT version 6 or 7, like maybe it'll be in a much better place. But I don't think that they're going to be able to regulate it. And I think what's going to happen to your question is it's hard to know what's real and what's not real right now across copy, images, and video.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is instead of regulation, we're going to get to a point where things that are generated by AI are going to be labeled as such, and things that are not generated by AI are going to be labeled as such. And then users can decide if they want to search on AI generated content or only human created content, because I think that is possible to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, this whole area, it's kind of like AIs, when they had like the spam bots and all of that. So talk about how AI is being used in marketing and how to, I'm always trying to think, kind of two steps ahead, of the regulators and all, the algorithms. So how is it being used and like how can you kind of stay ahead?
Yeah, so your question was about social media earlier. I think it's full of spam and bots and fraud.
Yeah.
The stat that I saw was in the last year, LinkedIn removed 100 million fake people profiles.
Wow.
Like it's just hard to wrap my mind around that stat. But
Yeah.
actually, when I look at other social sites like Instagram and TikTok, I think quite a lot of accounts on those, millions, clearly millions, are just bots and scams and fraud. And Twitter, or now X, I hate the name X, by the way, but X is also full of those to the point where people had to like turn off comments on their posts because every time they would post something, just bots would just attack, and it's crazy. Like if aliens were watching from outer space and watching our social media, they would be like, what is wrong with these people? It's not normal. It's really not normal how it's really a hot mess how social media has evolved. And I think that AI is making it easier for people to create fake people, fake voices, fake avatars, and I was talking to somebody who was explaining that their software is being developed now so that people not only write their resumes using AI, but then they don't want to go to phone screen interviews. So they're sending an AI avatar of them
Uh-huh.
to the interviews. Like, that's quite ironic because people are saying they don't want to be replaced, their job to be replaced with AI, but they're using AI to create their resume and to go to the interviews for them. I'm like, this is crazy. And it doesn't really represent it very well because AI uses the reason it only gets you 60% of the way there is because it uses words like,
Yeah.
Christopher is a virtuoso of the financial markets. He is a maestro. Like you would never say that. It's very unauthentic.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other question is, because you do a lot of B2B marketing now. I think traditionally, kind of like coaches or, others, they're doing B2C, but you're in your advertising and marketing space. What are the top things that are shifting in B2B marketing? Because I know like it's really hard to rely on income from sponsorships and endorsements. So how do you navigate this shift?
Yeah, so I think that it applies across both B2C and B2B, that the buyer's journey, how people buy things, has radically changed over the last 5 years. I think that people now research everything they buy online
Yeah.
a long time before they actually buy it and before they talk to a salesperson. And even the amount of stuff that's bought online, like pre-COVID, it was like, I think the stat was like 18 or 19% of goods were bought online. And it massively accelerated during COVID to like 35% of things are being bought online
Uh-huh.
because everyone's getting everything delivered. And that's just like a directional indicator of it's almost double what people were buying online just in the last few years. But more than even buying online, like in the B2B process, people now look at reviews and they research a company and its competitors. They do 80% of the process of research before they make a purchase, before they even talk to a salesperson who works for a company. Requires is businesses to rethink how they're positioning themselves and the marketing they're doing because your reputation needs to precede you.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies haven't thought about it like that as much. So like we'll just have the sales guys like smooth it over, right? Or we'll just come up with some really slick marketing that makes people like want to buy it. Like you have to really be more strategic these days to get good traction. And I think a lot of more authentic things like executives building their personal brand and being thought leaders
Mhm.
will be a lot more effective than, say, Facebook advertising.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking on the terms of these marketing channels, it was interesting because you talked about this everybody's going online and you can look at Google and all these things, There was I think it was one of the Blockworks podcasts they were talking about like in the early days like you could like there was companies that where you could buy like pens on online and they would deliver as kind of they ran out of money, but it was kind of a precursor to what Amazon and Walmart and DoorDash, all these Uber Eats do today. Um, and talk about which marketing channels have the best ROI. I'm just curious from a creator standpoint.
Yeah, so there's tools that you can put in place where you can actually track what your customer acquisition cost is for every channel, for every product, and for every geography, down to the keyword level of every campaign. And you can know, did it cost us $100 or $1,000 to acquire a customer in this channel? And that's really the level of science people need to get to. And when you talk about thinking about marketing as an investment, you can then just agree on a formula with your leadership team and your investors and just say, listen, if we can acquire customers for X dollars and our product costs X dollars for people to buy, are you comfortable with that return on investment in marketing? That's a much better way to think about it than people saying, let's allocate like 8% of our revenue to marketing. Like that is not the way to think about it because then you just get caught up in weird things like branding and awareness, and you can't really measure what's happening or what's working. But if you think about it, SaaS companies in particular, there's been over 10,000 SaaS companies that received private equity or venture capital funding. And they came up with the most sophisticated ways of tracking return on investment in marketing with SaaS metrics. And they looked at things like customer acquisition cost and lifetime value of the customer and looking at those ratios of the customer acquisition cost compared to the lifetime value and fully loading the sales and marketing costs in that equation. And so I think that that should inspire other businesses in both B2B and B2C to think more like that, because those investors who are putting millions of dollars into SaaS companies that were very successful, that's the most advanced way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this because I'm always like I'm going through, my different channels and seeing like how many followers, how many engagements, what sales or what came out of this. And it's again it's very sporadic. So it's like you need to have a team that's dedicated, a marketing team that's like always tracking and the revenue and or the analytics and all of the numbers. You're a really interesting question. I know we could talk for a long time. So, how the one thing you talk about is events and talk about marketing events and how you have to have great marketing teams and get more results using AI, using all the concepts that we talked about.
Yeah, so I think events as a channel, like historically in B2B, in-person events, like the permissionless conference where we met, like those sorts of in-person events are like 30 to 40% of the marketing mix or the equation for a lot of companies. And COVID shrunk that in-person event thing down to zero. And then it's been coming back since we've gotten past COVID. But and the people I've talked to, I don't think it's all the way back, but it's definitely making progress. I think people are now more comfortable with online events, much more so than they were pre-COVID. So I think that, and podcasting is a great example of that. Like what we're doing here, like people before COVID, when I was in the events industry for 10 years, I tried to talk to people about virtual events and like webinars, and they sort of looked down at it and they're like, that's dumb. Like, that's stupid. No one's gonna do that. And then it was like such a hard shift to it. And now people are like, oh, it's actually pretty good to have a mix of in-person and virtual events. And so I think that's where we're ending up. But I think that people need to think about the right mix of in-person and virtual events for their business, because that's probably like 40 to 50% of the marketing equation for B2B companies. And
Yeah.
even for consumers, I think in-person events have been a powerful channel for converting as well. But I would just say that I think marketers need to look across. There's not that many channels in marketing. There's, depending on how you define it, there's like 25 or 30. Like think radio, TV, PR, events. Like you can go through the list, and if
Mhm.
you just line them all out, there's probably like 30 directionally. And you just need to think about which ones are right for your business, which channels should you invest in, and then measure, what the performance is in each of those channels. I think certain channels, very interestingly, like I think YouTube, fascinatingly, might become a channel that is a dominant channel in the next 10 years.
Wow.
And it's funny because Google bought them many years ago, and it's been growing, but just because of the virtual event and how people like to watch videos, like I think that YouTube could be a huge power channel going forward, whereas it really wasn't in the last 5 years per se.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody I'm talking to is saying YouTube is the next, that's like, it's going to become like the TV or even the rate and podcasts are going to be like radio. And kind of these, and it's almost like you referenced Google buying YouTube. It's almost like when Zuck bought WhatsApp and Instagram and, all these, which is really interesting. It's so fascinating because the technology, like before, like when you had to hear like company earnings, you had to go on conference calls, but those are now like all on YouTube. There's blogs. And so the way technology has made for us to share information, it's really easy. And like they say podcasting is kind of like the modern day book tour. Like you just so
Yeah,
very
podcasting, there's podcasts now. And I think it's very cheap for marketers to advertise on podcasts. And you get sort of targeted by category. Like you could decide to advertise only on business podcasts, for example,
yeah.
or true crime, or whatever you want to focus on. So I think that that's really interesting that it's advertising on podcasts for the reach you get is a lot less cost than other online advertising channels. Like it's interesting. And then there's the organic side of podcasts, which is people running their own podcasts and doing guest appearances on other people's podcasts, which is also pretty effective in getting word of mouth, right? So I
Yes.
think it's podcasting is a very interesting go forward channel for marketers when
Yeah.
some of the other ones like SEO and email marketing were so powerful for so many years. And now they're sort of questionable. Like I'm not saying it doesn't work for some companies, but for a lot of companies, it's not easy.
Yeah. How can people contact you and check out your social media and check out your work and follow you?
Absolutely. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as Eric Eden. And I also run a podcast of my own called the Remarkable Marketing Podcast, where I talk about a lot of these trends in marketing. So feel free to tune into that as well.
And for all the audience, let's thank Eric for coming on and sharing his valuable insights and wisdom. And be sure to give all of his socials a like and follow. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely.